Welcome to my house. I'm going to watch a Doctor Who story nominated by a friend of mine. I've asked them to tell me what it is they love about it, and I have to guess what their favourite things are.
Hi Toby, my name is John Cooper and I'm a comedian and illustrator. The story I've chosen is Time Flight.
Right, well, I'm a little bit tired because it's taken me slightly longer to embark upon tonight's quest back in time, because it took me as long as it took the dinosaurs to die out to find the remote control. I have it here, and I'm about to press play to get episode 2 of Time Flight going, and I hope you're gonna do the same in 3, 2, 1. And that took far longer than episode 1. I try my best.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I don't know that.
Be quiet, Alexa, or I shall smash you to pieces with a hammer. I live with a robot woman who ruins my life. Yes, look. By the very fact these are being done by me, they're going to be quite ramshackle. So if you're into exactness in terms of lining up of episodes and, you know, the sort of little professional tweaks, they're not going to happen. I mean, I will work hard to make sure the font is fastidiously observed on the closing credits. But, so yeah, there will be certain things that are very, will take me an unnecessarily large amount of time to pull off. But the actual doing of it, I actually think that costume and that makeup, as I said last week, Callie totally convinced me as a bad guy. I mean, you can see Anthony Ainley's in there now, but he goes for it, and the makeup disguises him effectively. They bulked him out a bit as well, and he was a sort of convincing bad guy. Ooh, the doctor's question marks on his lapel are backwards. The question marks get a hard time now, I think, because they sort of spread like a rash, didn't they? Sort of got one and they gradually spread all over his body. I loved the question mark lapels as a young man. I thought they were a really sort of neat little touch, as I say. And you can have too much of a good thing, Doctor Number 7. I didn't like the cricket thing as a kid, because even though I played cricket at school, I think it tied him too much with one particular image. But actually, I do like this costume. I think it's only the jumper that sort of says 100%. He's not travelling through space and time. He's on his way to a cricket game. I think if the jumper didn't look like it couldn't be worn for anything else, I think the rest of the costume would get away with it. The silhouette's great, and I think the colours are great. And actually, cricket whites are quite a sort of dull colour. So actually, the splashes of colour that have been thrown in there, I actually think it's rather an elegant, nice costume. I just think the jumper is too work specific. What you're too associated with one particular thing. The Professor Hater's dressed as Matt Smith. Professor Hater's cosplaying as the 11th Doctor. Look at him. He really is. You heard it here first. Or is that what Matt Smith was channeling? I think he's the Nigel Stock Doctor. Nigel Stock, a fine actor, who I remember, I think, his presence impressed, I think maybe my granddad, who was never massively demonstrative about a lot of things, but he knew if a good actor was in something, even though he had no theatrical associations at all. He just knew stuff, my granddad. He was of that generation. You could ask him anything about it. He'd left school at, I think, 9 or something ridiculous. He was one of 12 kids, and yet probably knew more about a broad range of subjects than anybody I've ever met, because he just got on with life, and I think because he'd been denied an education, soaked up knowledge. And I stayed. It's not entirely irrelevant that I talk about him here, because I stayed at my grandparents when this was on, and they are the reason I missed the beginning of something, because they were. My grandmother was a Methodist who was all about, morals and stuff. You shouldn't drink, she'd say, and then at Christmas would have a Stones Green ginger wine, and that somehow didn't count. But they lied to me. They lied to me because they watched Crossroads, I think. And I said, but Doctor Who's on. They said, it's all right, it finishes before Doctor Who. And, they'd turn over and I'd go, but it started. They go, no, you've just missed the very beginning. And actually it turned out I missed a good chunk of it. And that, particularly when it comes to episode 4, because I remember Nigel Stock gets credited in episode 4. And he's not in, and I thought he wasn't in it, and I assumed it was just that he was on the reprise from the end of episode 3, where he dies. But no, he actually appears in a scene in the TARDIS with Stapley and Michael Cashman, Bilton. But I didn't see that scene, and that's quite a way in. We will see how much my grandparents made me to watch blooming Crossroads. But it was the fact that they fibbed to me. I knew that I wouldn't challenge, I wouldn't challenge that. It was quite mean. For Crossroads, I think it was Crossroads. So I was definitely with them for episodes 3 and 4. I don't know if I was for episode 2, but I certainly, I don't think I saw the scene where they sort of got over the death of Adric. So maybe I just kept missing the beginning of episodes of Doctor Who. Maybe it was to give myself something to discover later in life. Stock was of good stock, a fine actor. I remember I live outside a place called Ludlow in Shropshire, and have the Ludlow Festival where visiting actors would come and do things. And I remember in the paper it said an actor who was due to come to the Ludlow Festival has died. It was Nigel Stock, and I thought of him as very old. I think he was only in his mid-60s probably when he died, if that. But which is no age now. I've got mates who are 60. That's terrifying, isn't it? I loved Nyssa. Nyssa was my favourite as a youngster. I held a bit of a torch for Nyssa, and I love her costume. Her costume's absolutely gorgeous. The colours actually of this era, and they don't dare that costume, because obviously it's not a contemporary costume, but I think the Amy Roberts, June Hudson costume aegis do have a sort of theatrical grandeur that are really helpful in not being very 1980s, but being a bit, but because they're slightly theatrical and therefore redolent of the past. I don't look at Nyssa's costume and go, oh, that's from a television show from the 1980s. But I could be wrong, because I don't know anything about costume, but and it's tied with my childhood. I love Captain Stapley. I'll stay with Nyssa. Good for you, Captain Stapley. That's the good sort. The bubble bath sort of works there, the bubble bath plasmatons. His Davison's breathy stuff is great. Stuck on a fairly difficult set with which doesn't allow for much interesting shooting. Everyone's sort of standing around talking, although this isn't badly shot here. Some of the shots are just sort of 4 people standing in a row, but the grouping there was actually very nicely done, Ron Jones. But Davison's breathy stuff gives gives it such a sense of urgency and such a slight sense of panic that's quite Troughton-esque. It's weird because he doesn't look anything like Troughton. He's not, he looks like a leading man. He looks like a young leading man, whereas Troughton looks like a craggy character actor. But actually, in terms of acting style, they are not unlike each other. And I think are both splendid actors. And I don't think Peter Davison gets enough credit for being the character actor that he is, because he looks like a leading man, and because he's been such a sort of ubiquitous television face, and because he's got quite a, and I don't mean this pejoratively, quite a sort of bland face. He's got a pleasant, open face. But actually his skills as a character actor are I think, somewhat, I was going to say somewhat underrated, but they're not. He's never out of work. But I think he's more than a reliable TV face. I think he's a damn fine actor. Professor Hater's an absolute twat. All right, Professor Hater, you just... yes, I'm not sure what the idea is with making Hater such a Burke, but it does make what he does next episode sort of either unexpected or unsympathetic. I don't know. These aren't bad caves. Yes, Ron Jones directed this. You've got to love a sliding rock. They're the sort of things you take for granted in programmes of this ilk. Sliding rocks, sliding bookcases, rocks that you can get hit on the head with and not get concussion, but just sort of get knocked out without any lasting brain damage. The colours of the lighting in this set are nice. Ron Jones directing this. I don't think he was the first choice, was he? I think they asked Andrew Morgan, who doesn't direct until Time of the Rani, and was a very experienced. He'd risen in the ranks, production manager and things, and I think was going to do this, and then got a better offer, and so Ron Jones, who'd done Black Orchid, I think was his first directing job, then gets this, and we sort of forget about Ron Jones because he died sort of relatively young, and I don't think he gave many interviews. There's one in Doctor Who magazine, and there's one on video, isn't there, that's turned up, or is it just photos and an audio? We have got some footage of him, and he's on the French documentary about Trial of a Time Lord, which I've only seen once about 30 years ago, but I remember him being on that because they just captured him as director, and I thought, I'll give the guy his name. He's doing a decent job here, Anthony Ainley. He's I totally buy him there as Khalid. He seems like, but I mean, it's quite an early reveal for a villain. In retrospect, now you can see why. Anyway, Ron Jones, we sort of forget was has quite a long career as a Doctor Who director, right through till season 23, right? So throughout Peter Davison and into Colin Baker, and nobody talks about him much because Black Time Flight, Arc of Infinity, none of them are ever the stories that people love, although I think he does a brilliant job on Frontios, which I'm looking forward to doing, and I think is a story not talked about enough, and he does a decent job on Vengeance on Varos. And depending on how you like your Doctor Who, Mind Warp, I'm going to be interested to see how I react to that. But this, I always think this has I think people think of this as being a bit flat and a bit cheap, and it's interesting because the story is a lovely idea, isn't it, about the alien race with the two distinct sort of sides, and then being influenced by a baleful force, in this case Khalid / the Master, is a nice setup. But you don't, and it was called Seraphim at one point, but actually the Seraphim only turn up at the end of episode 3 to have a chat from a CSO studio, and so their presence isn't felt as much as it might be, and yet they're a really interesting concept. But I do like the incongruity. This is what Doctor Who does so well. I love the way that Captain Stapley is irritated as we are by Professor Hayter. And we love Captain Stapley. But the incongruity of these sort of besuited city gents or people in airport uniform doing this sort of parody airline stuff and trying to break into an alien catacomb. You know, if there's nothing as... Oh, see, this is good. They're doing this really, really well. And oh, that's really creepy. The idea that they can start parroting the stuff that they do as a job. That's quite a sort of grotesque parody of what they actually do because of the setting and because of the fact that we know they're parroting it because something is exerting its control. That's really good. Yeah, I thought that was really effective. Yeah, and of course, that's a very Doctor Who-y thing about. Michael Cashman. So it took Tegan. I like that. Is it the Doctor, Nissa, Tegan, and then you go, oh yes, Tegan. So Bilton, you've got an eye for Tegan, have you? Although I remember, I don't think I'm betraying a thing. I remember because there's a making of on this, and they interviewed Keith Drinkle, and he said when when he was cast, Nathan Turner or some had gone, oh, that's 3 then, because Richard Easton and Michael Cashman and Keith Drinkle are all gay. So you've got a full house, which of course is neither here nor there. But because Keith Drinkle had said it, I think there was a moment where Chris, who directed things, said, is this public record? Can we include that as an amusing anecdote? And it is in the thing. So obviously it was fine. Obviously Michael Cashman is very much on public record because he went to play Colin in EastEnders and then became a campaigner for gay rights and a member of the House of Lords, and has made an illustrious contribution to politics, as he had to acting, because he'd been in the Sandbaggers, and Colin in EastEnders was a major character, the first gay kiss on sort of popular television in the UK. And then he made certainly one that made a big impression, and he made a documentary about it afterwards, where he sort of compared the fact that there was a heterosexual kiss in the same episode, and said, but it was only his one, which was only a peck on the cheek with the actor Gary Hales, and a national newspaper the next day said, it's EastBenders. You go, I mean, this is the shadow of the times that I grew up in, and so when people kick back against, political correctness or whatever, it comes from an important place. It comes from the fact that not all that long ago there are some things that were absolutely extraordinary to behold now, that were mainstream enunciations from supposedly respectable and certainly, widely digested organs. I did not intend to double entendre there, but I'm quietly proud of myself that I got one in whilst making a very serious point. And Cashman's documentary was really interesting because he talked about how actually some kids came up to him and said, give us a fiver, give us a tenner. He said, no. And eventually he said, what's going on? Why are you doing that? And they said, there's a bloke over there who told us to go and ask you. And it was a photographer from a tabloid newspaper. So it's not only that they spread that sort of horrible, childish stuff, but they actually convoluted it. They controlled it. But I can't talk through the appearance of Adric. Very clever of John Nathan Turner. Because I'm guessing Matthew Waterhouse was probably still on contract, was he? So it wouldn't cost him anything. But it means he gets his name in the Radio Times. So fans who are looking ahead, because the Radio Times would come out before Earthshock's final episode was broadcast, would not know that Adric wasn't in the following week because the cast list was for both episodes. I mean, he'd have been bottom of the credits, which would have been a bit odd because credits are important in order of appearance. Is Melker Graham Cole again? Certainly the original Melker is Graham Cole, who is now an OBE and was PC Tony Stamp in the bill. There's a series of quite unusual OBEs and CBEs in Doctor Who. Not unusual that Graham Cole should have one because he's done loads of charity work and is a bit of a national institution for being Tony Stamp in the bill. But in terms of his contribution to Doctor Who, he's not alone. And in fact, the first actor, the earliest chronologically actor to be recognised in the Queen's Birthday Honours, I discovered the other day, and it's much earlier than you'd think, and certainly not who you'd think, but I might do a podcast about that, so stay tuned. But yes, when you look at some of the, we look at the sort of division in society now, and it's always been with us. The arguments may change their footholds, but they're still had, and we have made a lot of progress. And yes, that a tabloid newspaper would pay children in order to set up an actor whose greatest crime is to play a gay man on a popular television program and be gay himself. But I mean, you know, the moral arbiters of our newspapers are people who rifle through celebrities' bins for a living. It's anyway. I'd forgotten about that monster. I've seen the behind-the-scenes picture, and of course it's a visual effects guy with a thing, and I remember seeing that. They're saying it's from Time Flight. I don't remember that bit, but it's this. It's this sort of temporary monster that doesn't do much, but it's a useful addition to the story. Well done, Nissa. I always like it when Nissa's a bit broken. Oh, and the death of the monster's good. That's a nice effect. But where's the story going? Why? What, the villains fallen to the ground? The lighting here is lovely, actually. You know, not all of some of the rocks look a bit flat. Oh, and I remember that. Yes, the death. All that goo is fantastic. There's a series of quite nice goo from the nose deaths in the Davison era. There's the pteroleptil, isn't there? And there's a sea devil in Warriors of the Deep. Yes, Doctor, psychotronics. I think you'll find it's electronics. Yeah. Oh, you don't want that. Because you don't want Professor Hayter to be right, because he's a twat. Is twat, am I right? Because I don't swear on these things. Is twat a swear word? Ah, and I remember, I think I was at my gran and grandad, so I must have been there for a couple of weeks. It's unusual. Mum must have been on holiday or something. Because the Master, I mean, that was just, because the Master was relatively new to me, because I didn't know who he was until he turned up in Legopolis, and I think my brothers had said, oh yeah, he's from the past and stuff, but I didn't really know. But the fact that he'd come back, because he's from the past, whoa! I'm still enjoying this. It's a bit flat in places, but that's, I'm not objecting to it at all, and there's plenty of Alec Wheel. There's a name to conjure. How many episodes is he credited on? I did work it out once, because when he died, he was a Dorca Neuratsic. Oh, bless her. Anyway, Alec Wheel, senior cameraman, legend. So, what am I going to, and I think I'm going to go to bed after this one. I was hoping to do this all in one night, but I started about an hour and a half after I'd intended to, because I couldn't find this. It was actually just at the end of the sofa, but I was getting frustrated, so I started not looking methodically, and I wound myself up and got cross. A bit like people do before they go on Twitter and things, and then they end up, spoiling things, which is what this is an antidote to. So, physician, heal thyself. My favourite thing was Bilton and Stapley sort of reverting back to their piloty selves and parroting that stuff in that sort of grotesque parody of what they would do in their workplace, but it's because they were being forced so to do by the malevolence controlling the sanctum. I thought that was a really effective moment, and that they, particularly Richard Easton, did it very well. And it's a nice idea, the robbing of personality of what makes us, particularly as they're such game fellows, those pilots. I thought was really effective. Now, what did John Cooper choose? I think I've got to go back a little bit for John, because I went forward a little bit last time. Let's try that.
Episode 1. The best thing about episode 2 is the reveal of the master. Oh, he's calling. Oh, he's not. He's the master. Who would have known? Who's even there to see it? It doesn't matter. It's amazing. The best thing about episode 3.
Yes. As a kid, again, this is very much John taking us back to his childhood, which, to be fair to me, I wasn't present at. John, I didn't know him then. And actually, that reveal of the master, when I was younger, that was big news. Only in retrospect do we go, why the hell was he in disguise if there was nobody there? But I suppose if he knew the Doctor was eventually going to turn up, he couldn't just throw that Khalid disguise on, could he? He'd been in hours in makeup, and presumably he's eaten his makeup. His tissue compressionized his makeup lady. Reveal of Khalid is a good choice, but I like my choice too, because in some of these I've chosen swiftly and not very wisely. Okay, I'm going to bed now. So when I do Time Flight 3 and 4, I will be in a different outfit, but perhaps I will be in a different frame of mind as well, because I will not be fresh from an hour and a half looking for a remote control. But I hope we're doing well, accentuating the positive of Time Flight, because I thought this would be tricky, and I'm finding it actually quite invigorating, having been able to talk for 50 minutes about Time Flight and not pick too many holes, and I have picked some, and I'm sorry about that, but my heart is pure, and I'm doing my best. So I'm going to go for 40 winks, so I will be refreshed next time you see or hear from me. Thank you very much for being here. I hope this is all right. It's just an attempt to throw a bit of enthusiasm into Lockdownville, and thanks to however to the dozen of you that are watching this. Anyway, it's time to take flight to my bed. What do I press to? Oh no, I just say goodnight, don't I? I don't press a thing. I can't switch you off. I just have to say goodnight and then cut away in the editing later. So that bit of wordplay about time flighting to bed. Good night.
You can see me on stage as Danny Pensive, and I have a comic out at the minute called Distance, which is all about the crazy things and dark things that have been happening in the world since March. It's a strip that I've started. It's going on Kickstarter. You can find out more about it at johncooper.org.uk. Happy times and places. Bye bye.